I think that COVID-19 notwithstanding, we had reached in that almost 2-year period of time, it's hard to believe, we had reached in that at the end of that 2-year period of time, an end to an era that had kind of come over us like a little bit of a cloud that had kind of shut out some sun. And I think people had we started to notice that there was a bit of a decline in our people would characterize it at the South Coast Repertory. I'm not putting words in their mouth, I don't think, but as a difference in the way people were accessing entertainment. They weren't necessarily purchasing a season of something. They would maybe buy a single ticket to a play that they thought was nice or that they might enjoy. And one of the things that they did seem to regularly enjoy was Christmas Carol. And I think that this was an opportunity. We knew if we brought this back and gave them their opportunity to come to the theater and realize the joy of sitting in that audience with some fellow theater goers, even masked, and enjoying a play that they knew from when they walked through the door that they were going to go on a journey that was going to give them joy and a sense of wonder about what good things might lay ahead in this new year, hopefully post-COVID. But at any rate, and I think that what made me want to do it was the opportunity to bring people back to the theater for an evening of theater. And theater is a special thing. It's not theater ER, not the building, because it's just a building. It's a pretty building, but without something going on that stage, which is theatrical, which engages the audience in the storytelling. So we're doing 80 to 90% of the storytelling, the physical heavy lifting, but there's a good 15, maybe even 20%, some say 10, but there's a measurable percentage of that storytelling which the audience is doing with us. And you're part of that storytelling. And you can only be aware of that really sensory as an actor on stage when there are children in the audience. And they just get so wrapped up, and the parents get so wrapped up in those children seeing it and enjoying it, that over the years, they've come back time and time again, bringing those kids as they grow up until those kids have grown and are bringing their own kids. And so I think that I wanted to be part of that, to bring people back to a theater that I started when I was a teenager. I mean, literally, I was 19 years old. This is approaching 60 years in this county. And we have been the theater that has endeavored to provide that theater service to this county and to Orange County theater goers, not because we all wanted to be the stars, because we weren't always the stars, or that we wanted to own the county, no, or that because we wanted to make tons of money. Because theater is not notorious for being a way to great economic wealth. It's really done by people who just love to do it, and seen by people who, if they haven't found the love, they're going to find it again and start, I would say, by coming to Christmas Carol, because it has all those things that if you've been before, you remember loving. And if you haven't been, you will find again in this production of Christmas Carol. I'm told that is very true. And I feel that if you think you can trust me for almost six decades of doing this, I think I know it when I feel it. And I feel it about this show. It has that ability to bring you out of these doldrums and point you in the direction of some hopeful thoughts and feelings for the new year. So we're open. Come see us. Hello, Richard Doyle, founding member, SCR. And if you want to learn more about what's going on there, then watch this video and tell your friends about it too. And tell your friends about SCR. Come see us. I could tell you, as even a 10-year-old child, watching that, I still remember that. And I I didn't have very many visual theater experiences to relate to at the time because there was no TV in Italy at that time. This was 1952, something like that. And so most of the theater I heard was on recorded albums or plays that I read that my brother left around that I looked at. And so it stuck with me, the performance, even though it was done by young, high school students. My brother, was quite good as Scrooge, but he was still a 17, 18-year-old kid. But it stuck with me, that transformation that Scrooge went through and all the ghosts coming to impact on him, telling him that the good things that had happened in his life. And I thought, that's an amazing kind of story. And I was a storyteller, and I would relate the story. I would take over if my mother and father had guests over to our house, and they allowed me to stay up. I would often, pigeonhole some of the gathered guests with my storytelling, which oftentimes left reality behind, and I had to be corrected by my mother that what I was saying was, a little bit perhaps not supported by facts. And of course, I would answer that by saying, well, people would ask me, well, you don't seem old enough to have done those things, Ricky. And I landed on the idea that, well, these things happened to me when I was older. And I seem to think that I answered the questions. But anyway, I loved telling stories, and I latched onto that story from Christmas Carol. My mother said I would retell it oftentimes using other people as the characters in the story. And I think that I carried that forward. And when we got into San Francisco and I got to work with these professional actors, I also got to understand the idea of characterization and people playing different roles. And in the Christmas Carol, it was the idea that the core company, made up of many gifted character actors, we were going to play several different roles. And even though I wasn't playing Scrooge, I liked the idea of playing one character, say, playing Fred, or playing one of the solicitors, or playing a ghost, and then putting on a different costume or some makeup, or maybe different, beards and mustaches and sideburns and what have you. That would give me a chance to tell the story from many different ways. And I think audiences came to appreciate that form of storytelling. And in fact, I actually think that play, under John David Keller's direction, the early direction, and with Jerry's adaptation and Hal's portrayal, as it grew over the years, it began to attract people to the theater in general. I mean, not just theater SCR, but theater RE. The idea, this is kind of fun. This is like going to a storyteller session. And I oftentimes, when I talk to young actors, I say, you're part of a very, very old trade. And they always think I'm referring to, the Greco-Roman theater or something of that nature. And I said, no, this goes back to early man, when that one outcast in the tribe who wasn't a very good hunter and hid behind the rocks and trees would come out after the kill was made and everyone was sitting around the fire with full bellies, having devoured some of the woolly mammoth. He would come out and retell the events of the hunt around the fire, and he became the tribe storyteller, which may have saved his life in the long run, because he couldn't do what other people did, and he might not have been afforded any of the food, but he earned it by telling stories. And I tell them, that's what you are, that very old tradition of telling stories about the lives of the people who are seated around that fire. And that's what we do. And that's, I think, the attraction of Christmas Carol, is that it came to relate to the audience gathered there, stories about them as much as about the characters in the play. And I think they sit there pulling for the eventual epiphany that Scrooge has, that I think when they jump to their feet, not taking anything away from the enjoyment that they're having, I think that they are applauding themselves as much as anything, saying, yeah, we're good people at heart. There's goodness here. There's more good than evil, and good triumphs, at least tonight. And I think that's what attracts me to being part of it. I can say what I've just described to you about the experience of the play for the audience goes triple this year because of the COVID thing, and because people have been so encumbered by all the COVID restrictions in place and the protocols, that the idea that even though they have to come to the theater and be vaccinated or have proof that they are currently immune from any virus infection, that even though they have to wear the masks, there is a release that the show provides, the experience as audience going through this evening, going through Scrooge's journey and being engaged with the cast as they carry Scrooge along through this journey to his epiphany. That feeling is so important to us as a culture. And if I could say anything to people that watch your Zoom or that hear what we're doing here today, I would say, we're open now. So come and see us and experience theater and experience this particular piece of theater, because really it, as much as anything we do, invites you to join in, because audience is really a part of live theater, more than in a movie theater. Not to take anything away from motion pictures or television. I've been part of that entertainment industry as well. But the live theater is there's a synergy that exists between the audience and the actors on stage. We work together to bring all of us to that moment at the end that hopefully you are just so taken with what you have just seen and so reassured that life is going to be better and is good as it is and can get better if we just join together as we are tonight in the theater and take in the story and really enjoy what it has to offer and share it with all the audience around you. I think there's an interesting story that's told about a study that was done about theater audiences, and that there is a point in the evening in the theater when people are engaged and really drawn in to the experience of the theater and reaching the point where the story reaches its peak, where the audience is so engaged that they become almost one with what they're watching. And at that point, they test the pulses of the audience, and they all have, as one organism, kind of the same heart rate. So people get drawn in so much so that they become one. And now that can't be expected for all productions. And I certainly have been in shows where people have differing senses of how to relate to what they were seeing and how relevant what they're seeing was to their own personal lives. And thank you for enduring those performances. We know there are going to be some of those, but Christmas Carol is not one of them. It's one you will join in. I can almost promise you that. And that's why I like to be engaged in Christmas Carol. And besides, in all honesty, the challenge of undertaking this monumental journey that this man has to go through, and though I have watched it as other characters, I have not portrayed that character. And just to put in the back of your psyche that the performance that they saw of the earlier version of this production, that was a performance that was developed over 40 years of performance in front of different audiences, with a lot of input from different casts, some fine actors having played the roles, and also many different changes that Jerry very graciously stepped in and made little tweaks here and there. The performance that you saw just recently, Buell, that performance was achieved in one rehearsal period over 3 or 4 weeks with a relatively new cast, including a new me. But everything was there. Everything was planted in there for us because we had all been part of it. Many of us, only a few had seen it or been part of it, but many of us had been part of that experience, including the audience. And it was so reassuring to step out there and go through the first few scenes and realize, oh, it's still there. It's still working. It's still got the audience engaged. And that was very reassuring. And it just made us all feel really good that the audience was hearing it and enjoying it once again and being back in the theater again. That's such a great feeling. I think that, and again, John David Keller's production, Hal Landon's performance, Jerry Patch's adaptation, and all the shows that were done, many of which I was part of, they were all great shows. But the great thing about theater, it's an interpretive art. And so we were able to join that adaptation for the first time, Hisa and I, Hisa Takakuwa, who was the director, and Hisa and I had a chance last year to do the recorded novella of Christmas Carol, which of course the novella is it's a book, and that is not a play, and it has to be made into a play, and that's what Jerry did. And so we visited the novella, and then I recorded the novella as a voiceover, a placekeeper, essentially, for our audiences, because we weren't going to have a live show last year. So Hisa and I worked on that. She became what we refer to in the voiceover world as a booth director in her home, sitting like you are, Buell, at a screen. And I became a voiceover talent, which I am, sitting at my home system. You can't see it here, but I have a recording system here in my home. And I recorded that novella much as Charles Dickens would have done when he read it for a Victorian audience back in the 1840s. And we gave that to our subscribers. And that opportunity that Hisa and I had to do that as a team gave us a kind of teamwork relationship. And in that relationship, we discussed what we both wanted from this production to be more prominent than what we had seen in previous incarnations of the show. And basically what that was, we wanted all of those vignettes, if you will, with all the ghosts to be as able to move Scrooge back into those moments and be as affecting to him and the audience as we could make them dramatically without slowing down the pace of the show, keeping the show moving, but showing that we were engaged in storytelling primarily. And this is part of the story. So things like the scene with Marley. The scene with Marley is not so much about Marley coming through the door and being a very scary figure, which he has always been. Going back to Don Took's Marley, who was very scary. But now he is Scrooge's friend and partner, going way back to Fezziwigs. And now he appears as a spirit, warning Scrooge if he doesn't change. And we have to know that Scrooge is deeply affected by this because of their friendship, because he's seeing him and he needs for Marley to help him, tell him what to do, tell him what he's doing. And Marley leaves. He only tells him that he has an opportunity to change what will come. And then when we go to the Ghost of Past, who is Jennifer Parsons, a wonderful actress, and my wife, who also happens to be here in the apartment, so I have to be careful what I say about her. And anyway, she comes and she shows me all these things, reminds me about where he was born in the country, reminds me about his school that he went to and his school chums and how they went home for Christmas and he could not. And some of the dark times in his life when he was a child, and dark times but that were made lighter when Fan shows up and says he gets to come home because Fan, his wonderful, kind, and cheerful sister, a really bright spot in his life, he'd almost forgotten about her. He put that out of his mind as if it never existed. But it's because of her that he even exists, really, because she puts that red scarf around his neck and drags him off back home again for Christmas. A red scarf, which we wanted to be sure reappeared in the story so that the audience made the connection. Oh, this is one of the driving forces that brings him back. We wanted them to know the story behind the story, which is really what drives any play. And sometimes we get to need so much to get to what the good parts are when Scrooge comes back to us as a human being again, that sometimes we skip over the things that really brought him there. And so that's what Hisa and I did in this production, was to focus on those moments, his understanding of Fred's life now, his nephew, and his understanding of what he missed about his life that he brought forward from Fezziwigs, because Fezziwig was such a nurturing person. Even though Scrooge didn't have a nurturing father, he had many nurturing people in his life. His Fan, his Fezziwig, who made him feel like a human being and made him feel like he wanted to be part of what Fezziwig was doing. And he forgot that he had someone whom he was basically mentoring. It was his clerk, Bob Cratchit, who he had been kicking around for years. And suddenly in that scene with Past, he realizes, I don't know why, but I feel like I would like to say something to my clerk, Bob Cratchit. And he doesn't even know what he's going to say. He just is somehow, he's been carried away by this experience of seeing Fezziwig again. So we wanted to invest in those moments as we went along so that we got to the end. The audience not only enjoyed the end, but now in the show, when they see that red scarf come out, I hear people in the audience say, oh, it's the red scarf. It's the red scarf again. It's his red scarf. And I love that idea in storytelling. It sends chills up my spine when I think about it. And then, of course, wonderful Hal was able to do that great somersault on the bed and grab his hat. And of course, I am quite a bit further along than Hal was when he started, so I have to demur to him on that particular physical attribute. But we needed something to put a cap on the end of that bedroom wake-up scene, and we came up with the idea of Scrooge puts his hat back in the armoire, not thinking, and goes ahead and gets dressed. And then the hat reappears, and I don't want to give away anything to our viewers who haven't seen it, but the hat reappears with an interesting and uplifting kind of new sentiment around the hat that he says he never goes anywhere without his hat. And he pops it on his head, and off he goes on his Christmas morning epiphany, as he meets all the people that he engaged with in a kind of Frank Capra movie moment, as he meets all these people who actually were people he had seen on the street before, but somehow they've come back now as ghosts in his dreams. But he sees them again as who they were in his real life. And I love that moment too, because it's a bit of storytelling as well, until he finally ends up back with his nephew in that scene at Fred's, which is a scene that has always filled my heart with a lot of joy. And I think, judging from how our audiences are responding to it, it still has that effect on people. And I'm very glad for that. I am supported by a wonderful cast of people. I won't go into naming them all, but they all know that I respect them, highly respect them. They were very respectful of me and very supportive of me. And I can tell you that something like this doesn't happen in a void. You need an ensemble of people. And these are definite ensemble players. They support the truth of every character in the show. And there is no character in the story that needs the supportive truth of all his fellow ensemble members as Ebenezer Scrooge, and they are there for me every moment of this performance. I stand on stage and look around and see it in their eyes. Believe me, you are going to see an ensemble performance that I think is very moving. I think that it is unique, I have found, because it is the embodiment of a resident professional theater. And I mean that because we all grew up here. I mean, I literally grew up here. From my teenage years, I raised my families here. My sons, my son and his grandson, my daughter and her 3 grandchildren. My mother and father lived here. Actually, they lived in Lakewood, but they came here to see the theater. I have so many friends. All my doctors are here. All the restaurants that I enjoy are all here. And the people who live in this county and who inhabit the various educational institutions, UCI notwithstanding, all these people who are here who have supported the theater, they are part of the SCR community. And if you are a writer who is seeking to find a place to have your text, your work of theatrical literature seen and enjoyed and engaged with by a very smart, engaged audience, SCR is a great place to do it. And SCR has always been, from my very earliest memories, a play about, or rather a theater about the plays, about the text, about the writers. All of our new plays, all of the plays that we do, new or old, chestnuts, or plays that are classical plays, all of them, the focus has always been on the text. Just veering away from SCR for a second, speaking about text, I became, about a decade ago, actually several decades ago, I became a voice talent. And in the world of voices, you don't have scenic support. You don't have other actors around helping you, unless you're doing an animated series, which I've done. But a lot of the narrations that I have done, including I narrate for the Pageant of the Masters, I've been there for about 10 years. All of those narration venues, or all those narration jobs for documentary films and what have you, they all rely on the text, and it's all in the words. The story is in the words, and in the way the words are punctuated, and the way the sentences are put together. And working directly with the writer, you work to develop that story from just the words. And I became so aware as I became a voice talent, more so than I had ever been, how important text is. And when you come to the theater, you're going to hear stories. You're going to hear plays that maybe you might have seen somewhere else and not noticed before. That, oh, I see now what that's about. And at SCR, you will always see and hear the stories told very clearly and succinctly by very gifted professional artists. And that's the other thing that I love about SCR, is that even back in the day when we actually weren't paid, even though some of us were professionals, we still worked at SCR because we longed for that stage experience where the text and the story was primary, not the star that was saying the words, or how celebrated the person was that was engaged in the play, or how famous the play was, but it was about the story within the play. And we were all trained to tell those stories. I became even more trained to tell stories as a voice talent. And when we came to this production of Christmas Carol, Hisa and I wanted very much to be sure we focused on those central issues within those individual stories within the larger tale of A Christmas Carol. And I think when you come to SCR, not only in Christmas Carol, but when you come to SCR as a patron or as a theater goer to see whatever we're doing, you're going to hear the story, and you're going to see that story told in all of its facets. And I love that about a professional theater. And by facets, I mean, you see the story told in the costumes, in the lighting, in the scenic development, in the soundscapes that people don't even realize sometimes, that the soundscape sometimes begins when you walk into the theater. You're not even aware it's going on, but it's being planted in there. All these little tidbits about the story you're about to see unfold. And that's a professional rep theater. And that's been in SCR's mind from the beginning, even though, in all honesty, from the beginning, we didn't have the funds or the wherewithal to do all the things that we now can do. But even in the beginning, we had it in our minds to focus on doing them. And I think that even at the beginning, that's what drew people to go to a little 80-seat theater in an old marine swap shop and buy a ticket just to see what this South Coast Repertory thing was about. And lo and behold, it's about a Christmas Carol. Come and see it. Hello, Richard Doyle, SCR founding member since the early days of SCR. And I just wanted to say to you, thank you if you have been a patron of SCR or a theater goer at SCR. And if you hadn't been back in a long while, please come back. We are open and we would like you to come and see us. And if you'd like to, you can come and see the Christmas Carol, although I wouldn't recommend it. Whenever anyone says Christmas to me, I say, bah, I'm back. Now, please come see us and have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Take care.